Okay, so we're in Berlin for the 2019 Stretch Festival, and Jason has agreed to answer a few questions following the workshop yesterday. So I'll jump straight in. What was your experience of being a bonobo and then being a chimp?
Being a bonobo, it felt super organic. It was very explorative, sort of. You'd just be meeting people with a sense of curiosity, like, who is this other creature? And let's get to know one another. What kind of connection might I have with them? And I think it really helped. It helped in this, like, turning off of the logical brain as well, to really get into this more animalistic space of non-judgment, I suppose, and just like seeing other people from new eyes with a new sense of curiosity. And then going to become a chimp, where everything was extremely hierarchical and defined, and there was no sense of curiosity of who is this person, but just they're subordinate or superior to me. And so the behavior is just super regulated and defined. So I think it felt the biggest change was going from this really like organic feeling space to an extremely regulated hierarchical space.
And could you say something about what it was like to return to the bonobo space after you'd been in the chimp space?
It felt like this giant exhalation, or just like a stretching out, like even physically being in the chimp space and being so tense, or even like cowering and kind of like in a ball, and then moving into bonobo space where it was very like outstretched and more fluid, and safe. You know, you were moving from basically a space of fear to a space of safety.
Was there a point in the workshop that evoked a very positive emotion in you, and can you label that emotion?
I would call it delight. And there was a moment where, you know, the workshop is in the context of a festival. And so, of course, there's all these people who you kind of see around at the festival, and you're like, oh, I'm curious about that person. And being in bonobo headspace, suddenly they're no longer like that person who I want to meet, but maybe I'm afraid to, or I'm like nervous or whatever, and it's just a fellow bonobo. And so kind of being able to approach this specific person with this sense of, like without the mental blocks or fears or anxieties that would come with approaching someone who you're interested in, and then just being really playful and just like, oh yeah, this is just really fun. We can just be sort of these like playful bonobo selves. So I would call it really delightful.
And conversely, what point in the workshop evoked the most negative emotion in you, and what was that emotion?
So being a chimp, and you know, I got to play kind of all of the hierarchical levels of being a chimp, and being the lowest actually was not the most negative for me, but it was being in the middle and seeing someone else who was the lowest, who just like looked so helpless, and yet just feeling like, well, as a chimp, it doesn't matter if they're helpless. You know, it doesn't matter. Like, their feelings don't matter. And that felt really shitty.
What point in the workshop was most beneficial to you?
Beneficial. I think the transition from human to bonobo, because it's sort of the first time that you're trying to shed this intellectual brain and move into this new headspace. And I feel like that's so beneficial, like anytime you get to do that, where you get to sort of turn off your judgments of like, am I doing this right? Or, just everything being right or wrong or good or bad. And so I think that transition, and then sort of the whole family of bonobos all going through that, and then learning what it's like to be a bonobo, and that process was really fun to get to do together.
What point in the workshop brought you out of your comfort zone? What did you feel?
Out of my comfort zone. We were really encouraged to like develop communication with one another. And I think it's very tempting to just, in this sort of bonobo workshop, to just be like, we're just gonna cuddle and like, let's just be like really sweet and loving. But the reality of bonobo life isn't that it's just always perfect all the time, and that it's, everyone's just cuddling each other, but you actually are like animals that have needs and need to communicate, and you have feelings. And so pushing beyond sort of that entry, like first level of being a bonobo into more complex expressions of feeling and communication without using words, I think that really like stretched me the most.
What was your experience of physical touch when you were at bonobo?
A lot of petting, stroking, like pulling people's hair. And it was really sweet because it wasn't like seductive, or ropey, or even elegant. Like when you're touching someone, there's so many, I think, concerns as a human around like, again, am I doing this right? And in bonobo space, you can kind of just like, I'm just gonna like rub this person's arm, which I would never do as a person, but let's just see what that feels like. Yeah.
And what was your experience of physical touch when you were a chimp?
A lot of sort of knocking people around, or being knocked around. So literally like kind of bumper cars.
What was your experience of belonging and connection?
I think as a bonobo, it didn't feel like we were all just operating under this common understanding that we just all belong there. Like there was no sense that, oh, I'm not bonobo enough, or that I'm not a part of this. And so there was almost like no opportunity for someone to really be excluded. And there were times when like maybe I would just be kind of sitting there alone trying to express isolation or sadness, and universally someone would see that and come up to me and start like interacting with me or trying to make me feel better. And so even in moments when I was trying to sort of push it and actually remove myself from the family, like they always pulled me back in.
And what was your experience of competition and aggression?
So as a chimp, it's interesting because it didn't feel competitive because everyone just knew what their place was. Like no one's like vying to be number one. It was just very established. And so there's sort of this, I don't know, as a human, of course, we want to like fight back and sort of climb a ladder. And so to just operating under like, no, these people are just above me, no questions asked, and these people are below me, no questions asked, felt super weird.
What did you learn about yourself?
I think how much my interacting with new people is so like filtered through my projections or judgments of how I want to appear for them, or what I want from them, or how I want them to see me. So I think that it made that super visible.
And what did you learn about bonobos?
So I learned that when they meet new tribes, that the men actually start off in this really like aggressive stance, and then it's actually the women that come in and facilitate the peacemaking, which I thought was really cool because it challenges this idea that like they're just friendly all the time, which feels very kind of unrealistic, I guess. But like they actually do have this aggression and territorialness and potentially dominance inside of them, but they understand how to use that energy and sort of transmute it into something that is creating peace and unity.
Excellent. Do you feel the workshop experience will help you in your interactions with others?
I definitely will. I mean, I've already felt it at this festival, just around meeting new people with this genuine sense of curiosity and like, what can I learn from this person? Like, what is their story? What do they have to tell?
And if you wanted to, how would you carry the Bonobos spirit into your life after this?
I think trying to keep that mentality, even with people who I might be sort of turned off by, maybe I don't like their personality or whatever, and just trying to still maintain that sense of curiosity of like, well, who are they and what can they offer?
What advice would you give to someone thinking of doing the Bonobo experience?
I mean, I would absolutely recommend doing it. I've already been recommending it to people here at this festival. And I think just, go in with an open mind.
And finally, how could we improve the workshop?
I would probably have a bit more communication for the chimps around sort of expected behavior. I think it was sort of set up as like just be really aggressive or like sort of beat these people up, and everyone is like, I'm not really sure what that means, or like what's too far, where's the line, what's too far for this person, because while we started with a lot of consent around touch, which felt very relevant in Bonobo land, like in Chimp land there's also this big piece around like, am I consenting to actually this kind of aggression? And it was hard to tell when someone kind of hit their limits. So I think having more conversations around how can someone identify, like, you know what, I'm actually really done with this experience and I need to remove myself from it. I think that would be super useful. And I would also have more of like a structured share after, just because I think a lot of times there's very open-ended, like, what was that like for you? What did you feel? And that will get you like this deep, but there's so much below that people probably just haven't thought about, that with more structured or pointed questions, they could actually make deeper connections.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for doing the workshop.
My pleasure.